My name is Keith Kruger. I'm a game developer, an artist, and a consultant, and I'm making these tutorials for you. Welcome to Making an Auto-Activating Turret. In this tutorial, we are going to import a custom mesh for a turret, texture it, then we're going to set up a collision for activation. We're going to check out continuous tracking. We're going to look at how you check visibility to see if you can actually see someone within the cone or within your firing area. We're going to look at other detection shapes such as cones versus spheres versus boxes. And then finally we're going to wrap up by firing some projectiles. By the end you should know how to make an auto-activating turret that you can use within your own games. So to get started, we just have a very simple, typical third-person project here. If you've watched my previous videos, you know that I have a tendency to want to clean up these extra folders down here and put them into a libraries folder of its own where I like to put all the things that aren't specifically created by me for a project. But in this case, I'm not going to do that. I will do that for longer or more complex projects, but for this, we're just going to leave it alone. Let's go ahead and import our turret. And our turret is actually made up of two different pieces, a base mesh and a barrel mesh, as you'll see. So let's create a new folder. We'll call it turret. Then we can click into there and we will import. You'll want to go into your turret tutorial folder, which hopefully you've downloaded. So you have this. If not, if you have a different turret, that's perfectly fine. You may just want to skip ahead to the next section then. But we're going to import the turret barrel and the turret base. And they are both static meshes. So let's go ahead and import those. And yeah, I know I didn't do any extra smoothing group stuff. You'll see it's created the materials based upon the materials that were defined in the FBX model. We'll have to actually import the textures for that. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a subfolder here, which we'll just call textures. We can go in there and then import. Those textures are in the turret folder underneath the turret tutorial folder. So we'll grab those and import them. And setting these up is pretty straightforward. It's importing some things as normal maps that it shouldn't be, but we can deal with that. Okay, so let's look at this for a second. This is one of the things that said it imported as a normal map. I just want to look and see, and I don't see any real issues here. Turn off sRGB. Don't want to do that for all the base colors. So we'll click that, and that one, and that one. I'm holding down Control while I do this. So we can get to all these. Then I will right-click, go to Asset Actions, and bulk edit via Property Matrix. And I'm just going to turn off sRGB for all those. Save all. Okay, let's go back up here and let's put these textures together. I'm going to do two of them and then I will let you do the rest because the setup is the same for all of them. And that way you don't have to sit here and watch me do them all. You can take a couple and come back. So we will set up the base mesh and then I'll set up the control rod because I want to do some emissive color on the control rod. So let's start with base. We'll double click on base and open it. And one of the things I like to do to make it easier is I actually just want to put these windows side by side at the moment so I can just drag textures over. Gotta minimize that for just a second. And we'll make you a little smaller. And here we go. Now I can have these side by side. We don't need this parameter color, so we'll get rid of that. And all you're going to do is you're going to go into your textures folder. Again, this is the base, so the turret base. We are going to find the turret base color and pull that in, and then pull that off and connect it. And then we are going to grab the turret base normal and pull it in and connect that up to our normal. Then, because these are packed textures from Substance set to be UE4 materials in a packed format, we will pull in this turret base occlusion, roughness, and metallic version. And then the red is our ambient occlusion, the green is our roughness, and the blue is our metallic. And then you can see everything's set up there. So we'll save that and close it out. And then we will go ahead back up into turret here, and we'll go to control rod. Move that over. Once again, we don't need this. Go into our textures folder. This is the control rod. So we'll find our control rod base color and plug that in. And the difference I'm going to do is I'm also going to plug that into the emissive color because I want those control rods to glow. So then we'll pull in the control rod normals, and then our packed control rod occlusion and roughness and metallic. So again, red is the ambient occlusion, green is the roughness, and blue is the metallic. So you can see that's nice and emissive and all set up. Yes, I do. Okay, and I'll just show you quick. If you go and you look at, for instance, the turret base, you can see the colors and all that are in there, and it's all set. So if you want to apply the rest of the colors, go ahead and do that in the way I just showed you. Again, remember, red ambient occlusion, green is roughness, and blue is metallic. And then come on back and we'll go to the next step. Okay, so if you got all of your material set up and saved, then let's go ahead and let's move on. Let's create a blueprint for our turret. It's just an actor blueprint. We'll call it BP turret. Nothing fancy here. Go ahead and open that up. And what we'll do is we will add our two static mesh components. Oop, gotta stop doing that. Static mesh. This will be our turret base, which is going to take over for our scene root. And then we'll add another static mesh, which will end up being our turret barrel. We can assign our meshes to those. So find your turret base and your turret barrel. We're going to have to raise our turret barrel up here a bit. And the pivot point for our turret barrel is high enough that when we go to do our rotation, you'll see we're actually able to rotate fairly well. We can rotate 40 degrees up and minus 30 degrees down, and of course you'll be able to rotate 180 degrees on the x-axis, or around the z-axis I mean. So that's all set. Now if you want to put that out there and just see what it looks like, let's drag copy out, and we will rotate it. Even slide it back just a little bit. And if we play quick, then you can get a sense of how it is compared to the size of our player. So it's just a small turret. It'll do bullets. It's not meant to do, grenades or anything else. You would want to change barrel sizes, or in fact, you could even remove the barrel before you imported it and just have the casing part, because it's got a hole in it. Shoot out grenades or rockets if you want something larger, but this is just going to shoot bullets or lasers. And so there you go. It's in. That's a good size of it. PBR materials on it. So now, why don't we go ahead and set up our first type of activation, which will be based upon a collision. So let's switch over to that. Now, the primary type of activation you're going to want to use for this turret is going to be a collision, and you might do it in different forms. We're going to start off with a very basic collision, and then we'll show you how to refine it to something else. But a collision just works easy because when your character enters the collision area, it can kick off an overlap event and then trigger the turret to start firing. In another video, I'm going to show you how to do the same type of thing using AI, but for now, we are just going to do it through an activation. So let's go ahead and look at how we do that. The first thing we want to do is go back into our blueprint, which I have open up here, and we are going to want to add a collision. For the sake of the simplest demonstration, we're going to start with just a basic box for collision. So we'll add a box collision component, and let's do some resizing on that right away. Let's make it nice and large, so like 800 by 800 by, I don't know, 200, 300, let's say 300. And then we want to pull it up so you want the bottom. And there's probably an easier way to do this than I know, but I like to just go down to the green line here, and that way I can tell when I'm somewhat lined up with it. Because, of course, we can have our collision go through the floor. That's not an issue, but I'd like to maximize our space here. And for that, I'm just going to call it good enough for now. Let's compile this. Go in here, and we can see how it lays out into our map at the moment. So it'll cover a good amount of our map, including when our character climbs up here. So let's go back in here, and let's go to our event graph, and we can move those up and out of the way. And while our box is selected, we're going to want to go down and choose on component begin overlap. That way when our character overlaps, it'll kick off the event. And what we want to do is a couple things. One, we want to know if the turret has a target already. For the sake of our simple example, if it has a target already, it's going to stick with that target until that target is no longer an option. In more complex logic, you might look and say, okay, which one is closer, or if you want to be really nasty about it, which one has more health, all sorts of stuff that you could interrogate on the target in question. But in this case, we're just going to say if it has a target, it's going to stick with that target. So we want to know if it has a target, so we should set up a variable to track that. We got a nice boolean here. Pull that out right away. It'll start off, of course, not having a target. We'll set up a branch here for it. So let's start off if it doesn't have a target, because that's our initial thing. It's not going to have a target. What happens if it encounters an overlap? Well, it doesn't have a target. Excuse me, I just need to shut down iTunes. Apparently iTunes is freaking out on me. So we need to determine what happens if we have an overlap. And what we want to do is we want to know if that overlap is the same as our player at the moment. Now, in the future, you might have a list of actor types that you're going to compare it to, and if it's any of those, it could attack. But in this case, for this example, we're just going to go if our player happens to be the one who overlaps. So we want to see what the actor is that's overlapped. And then we're going to see if it is equal to our player. And so to do that, we want to get our player pawn. And we'll plug that in. And if those two are equal, then we know it's a valid opponent to go after. So again, we're starting if has target is false, meaning we don't have a current target. So we're going to check and see if it is a valid target, which would be if it's us. And then if that's true, we need to store that somewhere so we know who our target is for future stuff. So let's create another variable, and we'll call this target pawn. Or actually, yeah, target pawn for now. If you had other actor types, you could always change that to be target actor and move it up one. We're just going to stick with this. And this will be of type actor. It'll be a reference to the existing actor. So if it's true, then we are going to want to set a reference to that target pawn, which we already know is this actor. And then we need to say, okay, we actually have the target. So let's go ahead and set that. And so far so good, we've got it. We now know who our target is and have it stored. We now have said that we have a target. Now we actually have to rotate the barrel to get them. So we know the end result of whatever we pull together here is going to be to set a world rotation for the barrel. So this will be the end result of whatever calculations we pull together right now. So what do we have to do to get to that rotation? It's kind of white at the moment. What do we have to do to get to that rotation? Well, first we're going to have to know where our camera is, or not our camera, I keep saying camera, where our barrel is. So let's take our turret barrel out here, and let's get its rotation, because we need to know where it's facing currently. So we'll get to world rotation, and we're going to want the x vector of that. Whoops. Rotation x vector, sorry. Then we want to know where our player is, so we need to do some vector math there. We're going to want to remove the location of the barrel from the location of the actor and use that to figure out our target vector. So to do that, we are going to want our target pawn and its location, so get actor location, and we are going to want the barrel again. So we'll pull that up, and we want the world location. Hopefully you guys are hearing me okay. I'll triple check the volume on this when I'm done. And then we want to subtract the world location from the actor location. So we'll do some vector math here and pull those out, and that'll give us a target location for interpolation. So let's do some vector interpolation. Okay, so we're going to go to our target. And for the moment, we'll leave these alone, but we're going to have to come back to those. And then we need a new rotation, or rotator. So we'll make it from X on here. And we'll plug that in. We'll compile. Now before we go off and test this, we need to do one other thing. So we have our overlap, but we also need to have an end overlap. So on component end overlap, which we'll pull back up here. And what we're going to do there is we're going to set it up just to take away our target if we don't have a target anymore. So let's get our has target, and then we'll put our branch again. And this time, if we have a target, because we're ending the overlap, we'll actually drop the target. So we'll pull this out, and we may want to set our target pond to nothing, but we're not going to track if we have the target at the moment, so I will just leave it this way. So when we're done, if we don't have a target, we don't have a target. So let's compile that, and let's see what happens when we run this. I'm going to save that, and let's go ahead and play, and try and keep your eye on the turret. So we go off to the side here, we go to enter, and the turret flips quickly right to us. If we leave again, we come back in. Once we're in there, it snaps right to us again. Even if we go up here and we go around, it snaps to us and points upwards at us. So it was pointing up where we were. But, a turret isn't going to snap that quickly. that would be bad to have our turret snap that quickly, especially if it kept following. And you notice that's an issue too. It's not following at the moment. It only updates its tracking when we go in and out of the overlap. So we're going to have to fix both of those things. So let's look at how we do that. So raise your hand if you think that this has a simple fix. Congratulations, you're right, it does. It's actually pretty straightforward. So if we go back into our turret blueprint, there are a couple things we can do. First, I just want to show you one thing that I forgot to do last time that we should have done, and that is up here, now that we've got this set to stop having a target if have target is true. We're going to do the same thing down here. So if that's true, we will stop because we're only doing this when we're acquiring a target. And let's go over here to where we're doing our world rotation stuff. And it's going to be very, very simple. We just want our tick. So we have our event tick. And what we're going to do is pull that out. Gotta stop doing that. Let's try that again, shall we? Okay. We have our branch. We want to know if we have our target. If we have our target, then we're going to go ahead and take this action. And if it's true, all we're going to do is each tick set our world location again. Now, if we do that right off the bat, what you're going to see is that our poor guy has no hope of staying ahead of the turret, because the turret will move just as fast as he does. So we need to slow it down a little bit. So that's where delta time comes in. So we're going to take delta seconds from here, and we're going to plug it in so we have an idea of the time since the last time it was called. And then you want to set an interpolation speed, and we're going to go with 0.01 and see what happens. So we'll compile. We go back and play, we run in. Now you see it tracks, but it doesn't track as fast as he runs, so he has a little bit of a chance to escape, although it's still a pretty spiffily fast turret. So you might find you want to slow it down even more and make this 0.005. So we can do that and go back and play. And now it's nice, it's going to rotate to follow, but it's not super fast. It gives him a chance to actually get away. When we go up here, it actually has to swing around. So there we go. It's all on track. It flows nicely. It flows smoothly, and it can sit there and it can spawn bullets or any other projectile at a person as it wants. So the next thing is what happens when we're in the line of sight. And I meant to keep playing for that, so let's go back and look. Okay, so it's doing it, and you can't really see at the moment because of the way things are set up. But the reality is, if we go like this, it's not in sight of it, but it's still rotating with them, and that's because it's just going purely on the collision. So how do we handle it to where the turret doesn't track them if it's not within the line of sight? Let's look at how that's done. What do we do if we want to see if our character is visible while he's still within the bounds of the collision? So let's take, for example, again, in our screen here, we have this wonderful block, and if he's hidden by the block, we wouldn't necessarily want the turret to keep firing. You might not, it's up to you. Or you might want it where if he's not actually within the direct line of sight of the turret for X amount of time, that it stops. Especially if you can see it hitting some other object. The simplest way to do that is to do a line trace. And so that's what we're going to do. Let's go back into our blueprint and let's create a new function. And this function will be called isTargetVisible. And all it's going to do is a straight line trace straight out from the barrel to a certain length. You'll determine what the range is, and it's going to see if it can detect the target or not. So there's a couple things we have to do. We have our function here now, but we actually have to go back to our turret, in fact our turret barrel, and open it up, and we need to add in a socket. So let's create a socket, and this one's pretty straightforward. You can just kind of drag it to the tip there, and we will call it muzzle. And we will save that. So that's pretty straightforward. And then let's go ahead and let's start getting set for a line trace. So to do that, we will need to get our barrel. So we'll need a reference so we can get the socket transform. That'll give us our starting information for our line trace. Of course, our socket name is muzzle. And if you want to do something else, you could always set up a variable to link into this. So instead of typing into here, you can set it up. And when you set up the blueprint, you can put it in externally in case you used a different mesh. For instance, like the quad mesh might have a different socket name for aiming than muzzle because it would have 4 barrels, for instance. Things like that. So we've got that, and we're going to want to split the struct here because we need to do some changes to the rotation to make certain it's aiming straight out. We'll go ahead and add in our line trace by channel. Okay, so it's very straightforward. We know that our starting location is going to be the location of the socket, and then we want a beam that's going to go straight. Let's assume this is our muzzle socket with the arrow pointing straight ahead. We're going to want our beam to go straight ahead as well, out to whatever our range is going to be. So it's kind of like setting up an instant hit weapon or some sort of straightforward beam weapon that's not using projectiles, which I'll be covering in yet another video, but just to give you a heads up, that's the same type of thing you would do there. And what we're going to do is we're going to get our rotation X vector, because we need to know what the forward vector of the rotation is for the way the barrel is rotated. And then we need a range, so let's create a range variable, which will be a float. And we'll compile that, and we'll just put in 600 for now. So that's going to actually extend quite a ways because we're going to multiply to get that to work. And then we'll drag that range out here. We are going to multiply these together. So multiply the vector times the float and plug that in. And that way it'll give us the proper changes to this whole thing to make it go straight. And then we are going to add this to our initial location so we get the right distance. And then last but not least, we are going to feed this into our end. We want to continue to ignore self because we don't want to pick up the turret at all, anything within the turret BP. And then we are going to want to break apart our hit result so we can get to the detail, see if we've hit something or not, and we'll want to see if it is our target pawn or not. So we'll get that. Then we're going to compare our hit actor to our target pawn, and if they're the same, we're going to want to return that. So let's create a return node. Just going to have an out of visible. Whoops. And then we'll just feed that right into there. Okay. So that way, if it equals our target pawn and is visible, we can take an action. And so let's go back to our event graph here, and let's see as we do each rotation if our target is still visible. And actually, let's make a branch for this. We'll plug that in, and if it's visible, just for now, we'll do a print string of visible fire. So if he's visible, we're going to keep firing. If not, it'll be not visible, don't fire. Okay, just to make this one stand out, we will make this red. Okay, so let's compile this. Whoops. Hate when I do that. I'll fix it later. So let's go back here. Did I compile that? I can't remember. Compile. Dock up here. Some days. Screw it. Okay, so we go back here and we will play and route, and it's rotating, and it's not visible, it's not visible, it's not firing. Okay, so we have a problem. It's not doing anything, right? Well, there's actually a very simple answer for that. But first I want to show you something, just in case you haven't done this, which is, let's go into our is target visible function, and let's turn on a draw debug type for one frame. That'll actually, because we're doing this every tick that is active, it'll be a continuous line, but then you can see where the line is going. So let's do this. Let's make certain our line is straight. So we go in, not visible, not visible, not visible. If we get up close, you look carefully, you can see that the red line is in fact on him. It should be visible. And what's actually going on here is that our pawn is not visible, is not set up to respond to the visible channel. So we could go by camera and it would pick him up, or we could go by changing him to block on the visible channel, or we could set up a custom channel. But let's just do this for now. Let's just change the camera, compile, play, and there you go. Once it catches up, fire, and it's done. So can't see, can't see, can't see, comes out the side. It's still tracking because it's still within the radius. And again, you could have something that says if it's not visible for X number of seconds, pretend that he's not there, and then you have to catch up again. That way, if he hides behind the box, it would time out and it wouldn't get him. So that's an option. So next thing, let's talk about if you wanted to do a different sort of view collision. So you don't want to have the box where it's just omnipresent, where it sees them from any direction. You want it to be within a certain field of view, like a cone. Let's look at how that works. You can see that this collision would really work with any type of collision, but let's say you want to do something that's not one of the standard types. So we go into our turret, and right now you have a box. Of course, you could always add a capsule collision and just rotate the capsule. The capsule sticks straight out, so you've got kind of a cylindrical field of view. You could add a sphere, which would work kind of the same way as the box collision. Of course, you can always move the box collision so that it's, only in the front half or something, so people can sneak up behind the turret. But let's say you want to do something else. You want to do like a cone, a vision for it. So let's see how you could do that really simply. The first thing is we have to add a cone to this. So let's add a cone from here, and let's rotate that cone. Whoops. Do 90 degrees. Okay, and let's scale it a bit. Let's scale it all directions at the moment to start. Okay. We'll pull it up so it's coming out of the turret there. And let's scale it back just a little bit so it fits in the same space that did. So let's just pull that back. We'll go like that. And you could always make it a little squished if you wanted to. Like that. Maybe you don't want it quite as wide. Pull back in one. We'll go like this. And of course you've got a solid now, so if you were trying to do this, it wouldn't do any good. You would just have a solid in the way. So what we need to do is we need to make a couple of changes. The first of which is to change its collision type. So let's go over here and let's change its collision preset. Let's make it a custom. And we want to have collision enabled, no physics collisions. And world dynamic is good. We will have it respond on visibility and camera. It's going to ignore static items, dynamic items, basically everything but the pawn. So it's going to overlap the pawn, and that will give us a trigger. And let's see here, if we then go in and do our on begin overlap, we can actually just replace our box with the cone. So we'll plug that in there, and then we'll plug that in there, and we'll plug it in to that. And then we can just get rid of that one and move that on in. And the same thing for end overlap. All we got to do is pull this one up, get rid of that, plug this in, and now we're all set. If we want to do a really quick test, oops, actually, stop. Let's get rid of our box first. So, goodbye to the box. Let's attach our cone to the barrel so it'll turn with our barrel. And let's say play. Now if we run into this, it's going to follow us around. We're inside it right now. You can see the shadow. Tell it we're here. It still has the single fire thing to see if it can fire on us or not. And if you run out of the cone, it's going to stop turning, which is pretty much the type of behavior you might want. You might want to say, when someone exits the cone, keep turning in that certain direction for another period of time, or turn to reset back to the starting position, whatever is appropriate. We go in there again, and it's happy to try and follow us. So we're just going to run all the way out of it again. But of course, you don't want to have this big white thing going on here. So let's stop for a second and let's add a new material. We'll just make up on the spot. We'll call it clear material or clear collision. Let's open that up. We're going to take and change this to a translucent material right away. And let's add a vector 2D. So constant 2 vector. So 0, 0. We'll save that. Okay. And then back here in our cone, we will apply that as our material. M clear collision. Compile. We'll save all this. Now you see there's nothing there. And it behaves the same way. You've got the cone. To get out of the cone, you're in good shape. If you go back in, it's going to keep trying to track you. Still got the debug going on for if it can see you or not. You get far enough away that that doesn't work anymore. For instance, it's not reaching far enough to collide right now, so you'd have to make that longer to fit the length of the cone. But there you have it. That's how you would set up something like a cone that isn't currently a collision. So it would work with your turret. So last but not least, we've got a turret that detects you, that follows you, that sees if you're directly within the line of sight for firing. And the last thing is just, of course, to make it fire, right? It has to fire some projectiles. Now, we're not going to get into all the different types of weapon firing types you can have: instant hit, beam, particles, different things. We're just going to fire a simple, straightforward projectile. If you want to see other ways of firing things, there will be an updated weapon firing types video up very soon. If you're seeing this, it might be up already, but the day I'm posting this, it'll be up very soon. So let's just go ahead, and first we have to create a type. So we'll go back in here, and we will create a blueprint for an actor, which will be BP projectile. It's not going to be anything spectacular here. We're just going to add a sphere. And we need a sphere collision, because I prefer to use those as the base instead of a scene root. So we're going to replace our scene root with that. Then we need to add a projectile movement component. So we've got all those. Let's shrink the sphere and the sphere collision down quite a bit. So let's grab that. Let's take it way down. By way down, I mean way down. So that's probably good. Let's grab the sphere collision and we'll pull that down as well. Get this nice and small here. So 3, that's pretty small, I would say. Good bullet size. Our projectile movement, we're just going to be very, very simple about it. We're just going to launch out of our thing with a velocity of 4,000 on the X direction. And that way it'll just come flying out. And that's it for setting up the projectile. That's pretty straightforward and easy. Now we need to actually get it to fire here. And we want it to fire not every tick, because that would be insane. There'd be way too many going, too fast, and it would be quite a bit of strain on the system. So what we want to do is we want to set up a timer so that it goes on a recurring frequency. And so to do that, we are going to do a couple of things. We're going to want to set up an event that we can link to a timer, and then that event is going to call a function. So let's set up our function first. And our function is going to be simply fire projectile. Very straightforward, nothing too spectacular to it. And in this, we need to take our turret barrel and get its socket location. Whoops. Now I could actually get the transform and get both of these we can split these structs and do this. I'm going to be a little more explicit in what I'm doing here. So I'm actually going to, just for the sake of instruction, get socket location for the muzzle. And then separately I'm going to get the socket rotation. So we've got both of those. It has to be for muzzle as well. And then I want to rotate the vector of this, and not really rotating it. That's kind of a misnomer. This is just my way of cheating. I want to make certain it's out past the end of the barrel. So we're just going to move the projectile spawn location forward 5 units to get it past the end of the barrel. Otherwise, if it spawns in the barrel, it'll trigger the collision right away, and that's not good. So now we want to add these vectors back together. And from there, we want to make a new transform. So we know where we're spawning this. There. And I want to make this neat, so I'm going to pull it down. And that down. That way it's all neater. So we've got our new transform. And then we are going to spawn actor from class. Which we need to connect up here. So let's connect that. Our class is going to be our BP projectile. Our spawn transform is going to be right there. We are not going to change our collision handling because we're not actually going to be doing much with that at the moment. We want a reference to self as the owner / instigator. We can only be the owner because you need a pawn to do an instigator. And that's the whole function. That's all there is to it. So we'll compile, we'll save that. Then we will go back to our event graph, and we need to sneak a handle for a event in here. So what we want to do is move some stuff around somehow. Let's move this down a little bit maybe. Just as long as we can keep things straight. Let's set timer by event. Now notice where I'm putting this. I am putting this in the initial collision when we set the has target, not in the event tick, because there's no reason to call this every time there's a tick. We're going to want this to loop. We're going to want it to run the event every, you can do every second. I'm going to do every half second. We will pull this off because we need to make a new event. So add a custom event. See if I can somehow make this neat here. Or at least neater. There we go. This custom event is just going to be named fire. And all it's going to do is call fire projectile. So pretty straightforward. Now we want to be able to cancel the timer when they're no longer in visibility. So we need to create a variable for a timer handle, which will be of type timer handle. And then we are going to set that from the return of our set timer by event. And that way, when we're down here, we're actually going to want to clear and invalidate timer by handle. And we'll take that timer handle here. And that way when he's not within the visibility, this will stop. Let's pull this back a little so our lines can stay neat. Okay, so we compile this. We go up and we play. You see here, he wanders into the cone, and it starts firing. And notice it's going to keep firing even when he's not, set for the thing of fire, because he's still within the cone, and that was the key. Now, if you wanted to change it to where it would only fire when he was directly visible, you could do that, but we're not going to do that. So you would, of course, want to change your collision. Right now, the bullet's kind of flying straight through him, so you want to change your collision to impact and so on. But that is the general idea. You can find more information on mindless pursuits at these links. There are additional exclusive tutorials going up on Patreon. As always, I want to thank you for all of your interest and support. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. You'll help out the channel a lot, and you'll see when new tutorials come up in the future. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.